Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that really helps to get my channel promoted. I also love it if you'd leave a comment or two. Let me know what you think, if you have a suggestion for videos, if you have questions. I always try to answer my comments. This particular ring is the ring that I usually have people in my intermediate class make, partially because it's a different style of ring than we've made prior to that. And it also it requires you to do some different things to mount the bezel onto the band that the beginners hadn't done yet. And so I thought it'd be a good one to do. It's probably going to be an intermediate project. It's going to have a wide band made out of sheet, and I think I'm going to texture it this time. You don't always have to do that if you don't want to. And we're going to mount a stone on it, but it's going to be made out of 18 gauge sheet, so it's a relatively thick sheet. So it's a simple but classic looking ring, and I think it's a good intermediate project. I picked out a black onyx for this one with a rectangular kind of stone, and I think it'll be a nice classy looking ring, so we'll see how it goes. Before we get started, I wanted to thank some groups of people. My patrons over on Patreon are my core group of supporters. I appreciate their financial support, but what I really appreciate is the great community that they've built over there. There's a whole lot of talented people. They share ideas with each other, and they post pictures of what they're making and get input from each other, and it's just really a nice community, and I enjoy interacting with them all. So thanks for that, you guys. The other group is my YouTube subscribers, and we just passed 12,500 subscribers, which is halfway to 25,000 if my math is right. So let's get it up to 25,000 if we can. But thank you, those of you who have subscribed. And if you haven't, why haven't you? I have tons of content here, so check out some of my videos. But thank you for all of the support, those of you who have subscribed. I appreciate the nice comments, some of which are very moving and help to keep me motivated when I'm feeling tired or whatever. And I also appreciate the donations, like the super thanks and the buy me a coffee. That kind of stuff really helps with materials, because materials have gotten pretty expensive lately. So, all right, well, let's get started on this project. I think it's a fun one. So it's getting close to retiring this one. I've pretty much filled up this design idea book. These I find super useful. In recent years, I started drawing everything before I make it. At least kind of getting my ideas kind of solidified in my mind, and I find that to be really useful as coming up with a better outcome. So check these out on my merch store if you're interested. I have some new ones like this one here. It has some conversions on the back. It's got fractions of an inch to decimals to millimeters if you need that kind of a conversion thing. There's also another one that does American wire gauge to millimeters, because I know a lot of people in Europe don't use the wire gauge system that we use. So hopefully you'll find those useful. Here's what I'm going to make today. Let me see if I can find my stone. Where did I put it? So I just have a little rectangular black onyx. It's a 10 by 12, I think. And I'm going to make a bezel for it at a 3/16 inch or what is it, 4.76 millimeters tall bezel strip, fine silver bezel strip. I'm going to use 26 gauge, which is 0.41 millimeters. The sheet itself is going to be 18 gauge, just sterling silver sheet, which is 1.02 millimeters thick. And I'm going to texture it before we go. Now I was thinking about some of the various texture kind of things I've done in the past. I've reticulated these before. They would look nice with that. I've done numerous different things with the rolling mill. I'm going to use, today I'm going to do, my friend Paula in Hawaii sent me these really cool textures that she cut out with her laser that she has. And so I'm going to use this to kind of create sort of a flowy texture on it with my rolling mill. You could hammer it. These things look great when you use just a ball peen hammer on them. You could stamp it with something, or repeatedly stamp it, or whatever, or any combination of those things. Some other things that I've done in the past,
You can do sawed out designs. Now, I didn't used to do sawed out designs very often because I wasn't very good at sawing, and especially if you're doing symmetrical things like something on this side and something on this side. So when I would do it, inevitably one side would look completely different than the other, so I was always avoiding that. Now, I'm getting a little better at sawing, so I might try that again at some point, but um, today I'm just going to do a texture. Some other things I've done in the past, soldered on designs. You know, you can put some little wavy lines or something made out of some fine wire. Um, you could overlay some different metals on it if you wanted to, like copper or brass or gold. You could probably, I haven't done this before, but I'm going to try it one of these days, is kambu, which is where you kind of plate parts of it in gold. But there's a ton of different things you could do. You could, you know, this is kind of a standard tapered band shape. You could change that up, make it curvaceous or something, or you know, do a combination of some, you know, more than one of those various things that I just talked about, because there's a lot of opportunities. The thing that's really different about this one is I want the bezel to match the curve of the band rather than just having a flat side there. And so in order to do that, we're going to have to make the ring first, and then we're going to shape the bottom of the bezel to match the curve of the ring, and we'll solder it down that way. So hopefully we can make that happen. But first, let's make a bezel for it. One thing you have to think about if you're doing this, if this is your ring here, and this is your stone, you got a flat side on the bottom of the stone, you got a curved band. So you don't want it to rock in the bezel, so we may reinforce the edges with some tag board or something to kind of keep it stable. And also, because the bezel is going to go from different heights on here, and we're going to carve the bottom away, you need to make sure the bezel is tall enough for the stone to sit in it. And that'll make more sense when we get to that stage and I start showing you what I'm talking about. But so you don't want to use really short bezel for this. Oh, some other things a couple of other things I've done I forgot about. I have made it just with a plain band and then soldered either 3 or just 1 ball on right next to the bezel on either side, and that looks kind of nice too. I like that look. It's not overly complex, which is kind of nice sometimes. Angular bezels like this can be a little challenging if you're a beginner, because the corners are a little challenging. There's oftentimes the stone drops down in the corners a little bit, and you have too much bezel that you have to kind of push in there, and that sometimes can create problems. So you have to come up with a way to, oh boy, that's way off. Come up with a way to deal with that issue of the excess bezel there. So I need to move this bend a little bit because I put it too far over that way. So if I offset my pliers like this and pinch, it'll move the bend that way a little bit. Take a look and see from closer. Just a skosh more. I'm going to do this one a little bit. Okay, when I mark this, I'm going to mark it just a little bit beyond where they meet. Not much, though. I don't want to have a lot of excess. Oh, I wanted to thank all the people who've bought my ebook that I just put out. I really appreciate it. It helps with expenses and things. If you haven't seen it, it's available on my merch store. And I'll put a link above here in a minute, but it is a guide to all of the 2023 videos I did, which is, I think the book covers about 170 of them or something like that. And what it is it's a guide to the tutorials, basically. It provides information about the project, including difficulty level and the materials you need. It has my original sketch like I have here in the book. It has a picture of the final outcome, or outcomes if it's a multiple video or a multiple project video, and it includes some annotations I made about each one, whether it was particularly challenging and why it was, things like what I might do different if I was to do it again, alter variations you could do that might be fun, stuff like that, and it also includes a link right to the video. So it's a pretty easy way to have a whole bunch of fun projects right at your fingertips. So you should check it out. I'll put a link right up there for you. Alright, I already have a little bit of solder here, so I'm just going to get that all ready to go. And, oops. If you haven't been to my channel before, I use pretty much always hard silver sheet solder, and I use a liquid flux. This is My-T-Flux. I have some other ones when I run out of my My-T-Flux I'm going to try out. See how that works. Alright, where are my tweezers go? Grab one of these little guys. I think I did pretty good on size. There's not a lot of excess space there. That's good. So I think I'm going to call that good. I might do a little bit more neatening it up. But I think that'll work okay. Okay, so we should set that to the side for a minute, I should say. I think let's measure how wide I have this. Let's see if my bezel is pretty close to that, yeah. So the overall thing that I drew up is about 16 millimeters. So if we do 17 just to be safe. This is 18 gauge sheet. You could use slightly thicker, but I wouldn't go much thinner than that. You can get by with 20 sometimes, but it feels a little flimsy and cheap to me if you do that. And 15, 17 is about right there. It's about right where I have that cut going. So I'm going to cut off a straight line here so that I can get a straight start. Double check here. Measure twice, cut once, right? Okay, and there's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 76. That's what I wrote down. So 76. Just kind of laying out my design on this piece here. So this chunk from here to here is going to be our band. Like I think I said, I'm making a size 12 or somewhere about that size. So I get asked periodically to make rings for men, or show how to make rings for men, and I'm not quite sure what makes something a man's ring or not a man's ring. So I don't know how to respond to that other than this one is going to be big and bold, and if that's what you mean by that, then yeah, this would be a good man's ring. But many of the ones that I make already could be considered, not gender specific, I don't think. So So let's find the center of this and extend that across to the other side. Right here, right there is the center point. And we can taper these down however we want. I think, oops, these are about 8 millimeters, so if I find the center of that, or if I go, that's probably the easiest way, is to find the center. If I'm not really following a plan, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just measure in, 4 millimeters from this side, 4 millimeters from this side, or whatever. That works just as well, as long as you do it the same on both sides. So now I've got a mark here, 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 and a mark here. I just need to kind of connect the dots now. These lined up nicely. Try and do them pretty similar to each other. That's pretty good. So now you can saw this out if you want to. I'm going to cut out the rectangle and get it pretty close and then file it. But whatever way you want to do it is fine. So. One thing I didn't compensate for that I probably should note is that when I run this through the rolling mill to texture it, it's going to make it slightly bigger, so I may need to trim it down to get it where I wanted it to be. But that's okay. We can do that as we come to it. I get asked a lot what these shears are. These are just Fisker's craft shears. I'm kind of putting them through their paces. This is about as thick as you can cut with them, and it does eventually wear them down if you use this kind of thick sheet metal with these. It'll do it, but it'll give up the ghost after a while. I'm just going to file it enough to get rid of any sharp edges. I'm going to try and preserve some of this because I've only got so many pieces of this stuff, but I think I'm going to make a little sandwich out of this. I'm going to use some masking tape to kind of hold it all together maybe. Maybe let's take a little piece of tape, this here, just hold this in place. Doesn't move as much. That like that. Okay, well hopefully I got that sitting in the right spot. Let's go over to my new rolling mill. I am an affiliate of Pepe Tools, and this is the rolling mill they gave me, so it's a really nice piece. There's going to be a link in the video description if you're interested, and I'll put one right here too if you want. If you're thinking about getting a rolling mill, this is the nicest one I've ever used, so it's really nice. So I'm going to back this open a little bit, if I remember which way to go. This way. I want to get it in there, and then I want to tighten it down. I marked where I wanted it to be depth-wise. So I'm just realigning it where I had it. Hopefully. Okay, let's see how that works. That came out pretty cool. I really like that. Okay, so let's go back over and we will check the size and maybe trim it down a little bit if we need to, and then I'll clean up the edges, and then we can shape this into a band. Alright, so you can see it's a little bit longer than when I first cut it, and lucky for me, it's just about the right amount to cut off this piece that didn't quite get on the pattern, and so it didn't have an impression there. So I can just cut it off right along there, I think, and that'll be about right. And then we can just kind of, I think width-wise, it didn't spread out too much. So if we just neaten it up, that'll look pretty good. So let's make a mark, and we'll cut it off right about there. Okay, I'm going to spend a little time filing. Okay, I'll be back in a minute. I used the file to neaten everything up, try to get these as straight as I could. One thing I want to do though before I make this into a band is I want to anneal it, because running it through the rolling mill is putting a huge amount of pressure on the metal, which causes it to become hard and springy, so it's much harder to bend than it was. And consequently, it will also be brittle and hard, difficult to shape. So let's see if we can't soften that back up again. I always try to get it kind of to where it's got this just a little bit of a red hue to it, and you move it back and forth. And keep it there for a little bit, and then just let it cool off. Okay, so next step, let's turn this into a band. I always like to bend these towards each other. to make sure that you get a really solid seam. So I'm going to flux it, and then we're going to put a couple of pieces on the inside. I may also tip it and then heat from the outside to draw some of that solder all the way through. Sometimes that helps. Let's get it fluxed. There's quite a bit of metal in this, so I'm going to heat it pretty thoroughly, the entire thing. It'll take a little longer than sometimes. If you're new to this, once it gets up to the soldering temperature, the solder will tend to flow towards where it's hottest. So once it flows, that's the reason I was going to tip it over. Let's get that to flow again to make sure that it fully penetrates that seam. That should give us a pretty secure solder seam. We didn't have a huge amount of excess overflow, so that should preserve that pattern pretty well. If you're making a wide band for someone like this, and they normally, if you measure their finger with a narrow finger gauge, you're going to want to add an extra half a size or so, because this loose flesh around everybody's fingers here, with a narrow band it squishes to either side of the band. With a wide one, it has to be contained inside of the space there, and the size needs to be slightly bigger in order to accommodate that. A little loose on this one, a little tight on this one. So if I ate some salty food, it would be perfect on this finger. Alright, well, we'll leave it that size anyway, that's fine. So now, looking at this is kind of the top right here. And we want to take this bezel, which has a flat bottom, and we need to curve it so that it will sit down on there. So basically we need to cut a piece out of the side of the bezel on either side like that. Just like remove the stuff that's black there on both sides so that this will sit down on that. And I'm going to do it in stages so that I don't take too much material off. But let's go over and do that. I'm just going to use my Dremel with an abrasive white wheel, I think. Cut a kind of an arc on this, but not probably as tall as that black mark that I made. A lot of times what I'll do, kind of cut a notch in the middle here. On both sides. And then gradually taper it over to the corner. What I'm looking for, so I want it to sit flat enough to where there's not a big crack there. This is actually surprisingly close. I'm just going to do a little fine tuning to get that a little closer. I think I'm satisfied with that. Sorry, I was out of frame for a second there. That's pretty close. I usually drape it over a third hand at this stage. That'll allow me to get good heat access to all of the mass that's in the bottom of the ring. So try and get a good crusty fluxing going on here. Okay.
Alright, I'm going to let that pickle for a little while, and then we'll polish it, and we'll set the stone.
Alright, so I got it polished up, and I filed this down to about the level where I just was able to put a couple of little skinny slivers of some of this thick tag board, which I usually get off the backs of legal pads, to just the right height. These corners aren't so sharp. If I have really sharp corners that I have to deal with, sometimes I will take my little file and thin out the metal just a tiny bit on the corners, because sometimes you're trying to force too much metal over a sharp corner like that, and it has a tendency to wrinkle and crumple because you're trying to compress too much metal into too small of a space. But I think we're going to be okay on this one. I use the flat side of my needle nose or chain nose pliers, and I'm going to start by going straight in on the corners while I'm pushing down with my thumb. And we'll start filling in the middles. The middle of the sides, I should say. Once I feel like I have just having a grasp on the top of the widest point in the stone where it starts to taper back inwards, then I'm going to take the rounded outer part of these and I'm going to rub that top edge. This is called burnishing. So that's much like what I wanted. The pattern I drew on here doesn't look exactly like the pattern on here, but I think when it moves in the light, it catches a lot of light. It's nice. So there you go. There's kind of a wide band ring with a pattern on it. And like I said, there's lots of different things you can do here. You could do some decorative balls, or you could do some cutouts, or you could reticulate it, or whatever. But it's a good base, kind of simple wideband ring. Swap out different kinds of stones. You can put faceted stones and bezel settings. You can actually mount a prong setting on top of it if you wanted to, I suppose. But it makes for a nice, clean, kind of bold ring. So, and you can tell I actually decided to cut it down a little bit. I cut it down so it's not quite so huge, and back down to about a 12. So, all right. Well, I'll take some better pictures and put them at the end.
Okay, well that was the wideband stone ring. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, make sure to hit the like button before you leave, and check out a few of my other videos. I have 335 plus videos now, and there's almost certainly something you'll find interesting there. So check it out, subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to hit the video description down below. There's information about buying my ebook if you're interested in that, like I talked about earlier. There's a link to my merch page if you want to get yourself one of those nice design idea books, which I find so handy. And there's a few other relevant links. My Pepe Tools affiliation link, if you click on that and go buy a nice rolling mill for yourself, that helps me out a lot. So do that. All right, well, thanks for coming. Take care. Happy silversmithing.